Okay, I think we are now live. So I want to just say hello to everybody who is watching us. I'm hoping we are live. Please tell me that we are live. Well, we'll just go ahead. Yes, we're live. We're live now on Facebook. So I just want to say hello. Welcome to Tracy Talks To. This week, I'm delighted to be talking to C.L. Taylor, B.A. Paris, and M.W. Craven. So I'm going to ask you each, if you don't mind, just introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about the books you write, and then we'll go through the next bit. So, Callie, if you don't mind starting.
Sure. So I'm the author of 7, nearly 8 psychological thrillers. They are all standalones. Some of the ones you might heard of: Sleep, The Lie, Strangers. The new one coming out in end of April is called Her Last Holiday. I've had, out of 7 books, I've had 6 Sunday Times bestsellers, sold over 1 million copies, and they've been translated into 25 languages. And Sleep has been optioned for TV.
Ooh, talk about that. BA or Bernadette, would you like to tell us about yourself?
Yes, so I'm B.A. Paris, and I write psychological thrillers like Kelly, all standalones, and I think probably my best known one is Behind Closed Doors, which has sold quite a lot of copies and been translated in quite a lot of countries. And my latest one is The Therapist, which is coming out in April the 15th. It's another psychological thriller. And yeah, that's about it, really. I don't know whether you want me to tell you about the psychological thriller.
We'll talk about it in more detail. Thank you. And MW, or Mike, as we can call you.
Hiya, I'm Mike Craven. I write the Poe and Tilly series. They're probably straight up police procedurals rather than psychologicals. The puppet show, with its new cover, won the Crime Writers Association Gold Dagger, which was pretty cool. There's 3 in the series so far, in a collection of short stories, with the 4th out in June.
Lovely, thank you. Right, so I'm just going to see what's going on on the book club. So we've got a few people watching. Everyone's saying hello. Oh, and Claire wants to say yes. This is the first one she's actually remembered on the right night to watch live. So hi, Claire, thank you.
We're honoured.
Yeah, and Louise Beach would like to know that you've all got your trousers on. Typical.
Slippers.
All got trousers on, right? Lovely. So. I've written some notes down, but you're now in the wrong order of my notes, so this is going to be interesting. Right. Let's talk first about, we were having a little chat offline before, and we were talking about your route to publication and rejections and stuff. So it would be quite interesting, Callie, if you could tell us what you did prior to becoming a writer and how you wrote your first book and got published, please.
Yeah, sure. So before I was a writer, I worked in e-learning, which is quite boring, really, designing courses for corporates and then designing master's degrees for universities and managing a team. And I started dabbling in short stories probably when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, entering them into competitions, women's magazines, trying to get them published, that sort of thing. But I'd always wanted to write a novel ever since I was about 8 years old. But I always kept putting it off because I was too afraid. Because I think when something is your greatest dream, you're very scared of putting yourself out there in case it doesn't work out for you. But then a friend of mine who'd always been a huge support, I was 33, very sadly, she suffered a brain aneurysm and died within 3 days of it happening. And that made me realise that life's short, and that if you've got a dream, you really need to pursue it while you can. And so then I wrote like a madwoman. The novel just came out of me. It was when I wrote romantic comedies, it was Heaven Can Wait. And I wrote it in just under 4 months after work, and then every evening. And that was actually the book that got me my first deal. I had a deal with Orion. But rom-coms were really on the wane at the time, and after the second book came out, the editor culled a load of us rom-com writers. I think she probably left 4 or 5 of us go, something like that. And then I was on maternity leave with my son, and I had an idea for a crime story, and I realised it was a psychological thriller. I wrote it, and my agent then subbed it. And like Bernadette, we had this conversation earlier before we started. It was turned down by every single publisher. It went to acquisitions, which is a meeting where the marketing, PR and the editor all decide if a book should be published. It went to an acquisitions meeting and failed. And then Avon Books said, yes, they'd like it. And so The Accident was published in 2014, and being rejected by so many companies, publishing companies, turned out to be the best thing that could ever happen to me.
Thank you. Bernadette, your story?
Well, I was a teacher before. I was living in France. So I lived in France for over 30 years before moving back to the UK a couple of years ago. And I was teaching business English in Paris. And I'd always wanted to write children's stories. For me, there was no way I was ever going to write a novel. And then one day, one of my daughters told me there was a competition in the Sunday Times for a novel. And she said, you should try it. And I said, I could never write a novel, never. But that night I had an idea, so I started writing, and it was like a drug. I just couldn't stop writing. I didn't even have a computer. So I went out, bought a computer and started writing. And I wrote just for a couple of years without even trying to get published. And then a friend said, you should try and get published. So I started sending off to agents, and I just got rejected. So anybody out there who wants to be a writer, don't worry. I got rejected so many times. And each time I got rejections from agencies, I'd just write another book, and then I'd try that. And I was rejected again. I'd write another book. I've got quite a lot of back books, but they're not psychological thrillers. And actually one agency did say, you can write, so don't give up. But what you're writing isn't right for the market at the moment. So I said, what is right? And they said psychological thrillers. And I said, I will never, ever write a psychological thriller. And then, because I actually hadn't thought about genre, I didn't even know really what a psychological thriller was. And then I wrote Behind Closed Doors, and that was just picked up, and it was called a psychological thriller. And then now I have to write psychological thrillers. But again, I believe that Behind Closed Doors was sent out to several publishing houses, and it was rejected by quite a lot of them, and then picked up by Mirror, which was a tiny publishing house at the time. So yeah, you just have to carry on and just, if you have that kind of self-belief and just put up with the rejections. And actually each rejection just made me more determined. It was kind of, I'll show you one day.
And you have. I hope you walk around with your book going, no, 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 no.
Not quite, but in my head maybe.
Mike, your story too. You've got an interesting backstory. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, certainly. I joined the army by accident when I was 16. I went into the recruitment office with my friend who was joining. I ended up joining. He's been a painter and decorator for this part of 30 years now. I pretty much left by accident 10 years later. I didn't have a clue what I was going to do. I was just bumming around Newcastle, and I thought I might want to work with otters because I was working for the Wildlife Trust, just doing a bit of jobbing for them. So I did a degree in social work instead and became a probation officer, which I did for 16 years and ended up as an assistant chief. But in 2003, when I was a senior probation, I'd only just been promoted actually. I was 4 days into my first management job, and I was rushed into hospital and all sorts of tests and things, and then a 12-hour operation, and then some chemotherapy. I was an inpatient in the RVI for 6 months. At one point I was told, we're going to move you to palliative care because the treatment isn't working. But anyway, I'm still here. But when I came out of hospital, I had some mobility issues which I hadn't had to deal with before. So I started to write again, which I hadn't done really since since school. Really, I didn't write at all when I was in the army. And I wrote and I messed around, and then eventually I thought I want to write this story of what happened, because it's being on a sort of cancer ward. It's actually quite funny if you've got a weird sense of humour, which I have. And so I in the end I didn't do that. But what I did do, I wrote a crime story, and I gave my protagonist the same illness I had, virtually, with a few changes to the side effects of his treatment, because it didn't quite work. I needed something different for him, and that got picked up. It got shortlisted for the debut Dagger in 2013, which got me a publishing deal with a small publisher. And then I met my agent the year after, and I was able to give him a copy of the novel, which he enjoyed, and said, "Can you write me another?" Actually, I gave him the second one, and he said, "Can you change it completely and write it as if it's the first one of the new series, because I can't sell this series because it hasn't even sold 1,000 copies." And I said, "It'll be easier for me just to write one from scratch than rewrite this one as the first thing," which I did, and then he was able to sell that to Little Brown, which is nice. What he didn't tell me, and I've got it out, and we just talked about this before, and the amount of rejections that I had, which I didn't actually know about, because that's what the agents for. So I had a few rejections. I just don't know who they were with, or other than the one where one of the editors says he's no David Mock, which David Mock's a friend of mine, so that was quite funny. So yeah, it's not the most direct route into publishing, but I certainly haven't had the sort of plethora of rejection slips. I just haven't. I've never had one, because all the rejection slips now are firmly from David. That I don't get to see them. I think he thinks I'm too sensitive and I can't handle it, which I can't, obviously.
Well, we can talk about being sensitive when we talk about the dreaded 1-star reviews later, which is always entertaining for us, not so much fun for you guys, I can imagine. But all of you have got some incredible reviews on Amazon for all of your books. I mean, I was looking through. I mean, Bernadette, your Behind Closed Doors, which was your debut novel, published in February 2016, has got over 12,700 reviews.
That's it now.
Which is incredible, considering such a small percentage of people actually do write reviews. Mm-hmm. If you think of, because apparently, according to Amazon, that particular book sold over 1 million copies in the UK, probably more now. So really, percentage, 12,700 reviews out of 1 million, but still. It's pretty impressive. How do you deal with negative reviews, all of you? Because I mean, I know you're not on Facebook, Bernadette, which is possibly a wise move in some.
I do, but I just use it just to post something very rarely. I'm not very good on social media.
There are lots of book groups out there, certainly on Facebook. Not my group, I hasten to add, that are very open to be critical about books they don't like, and I'm trying to be polite, but they're real wankers, and they can be really nasty, and they can be very personal, and they can be, well, they don't think that the author has feelings, I think, or they think they're an expert on the English language. And there's a lot of groups out there that are more than happy to say, "I hated this book, what do you think?" Well, we don't do that on the book club. We don't talk negatively about any books. If you don't like it, move on. Life's too short. But I know for a fact that when I read Behind Closed Doors, I loved it, because I love dark and twisted, and it's dysfunctional and it's uncomfortable. To me, it was a perfect 5-star. But there were quite a few people that were uncomfortable with. It's obviously domestic violence. There's obviously a lot of issues, and there's trigger warnings. And it is a book that probably is a Marmite book for a lot of people that are sensitive or don't understand what a psychological thriller is all about. So as your first book, Bernadette, I'll ask you, how did you deal with the negative reviews?
I remember the first negative review was on publication day, and my brother phoned me up and he said, "Have you seen your 1-star review?" And it was from my lovely brother, and it was from somebody who said, "My 5-year-old son could write a better book than this." So I'd like to say to that chap now, maybe get your son to write a book like that, because it can sell quite a lot of copies. But and I remember what I did is, after, I think, Behind Closed Doors, I read quite a few of the 1-star reviews, but it does make you feel really terrible. And actually, for my other books, I haven't really read them. I just thought, why go there? And for The Dilemma, actually, I did read a few the other day, because I was thinking, I'll just have a look at the 1-star reviews. And I felt so depressed after I just read thank you. I read the 5-star, a few 5-stars, just to make me feel a bit better, because it is really hard sometimes when you get. And Tracy, you were talking yesterday, or not yesterday, because I watched it yesterday, about the person for The Dilemma who said they put it down because it wasn't Northampton, it was Southampton. I said there was a beach in Southampton. I know North. So, and the thing is, all I needed to do was write, they drove towards Southampton to walk on the beach. I put they drove to Southampton, and the beach isn't actually, it's just a bit further along, but it's about a mile away.
You know what? I mean,
it's incredible.
Technology is wonderful, but I do believe that certain people should have a license to have Wi-Fi, because really, you get these people that read a book, and then, I mean, I get messaged all the time and emails all the time. People see me on the blog and then they think I'm an author. And then someone actually messaged me the other day after my chat with Matt Aldridge about his Helen Gray, saying, I really loved books 1, 2, and 3. Would you please send me books 5, 6, and 7? But you know what? Bless him. But anyway, but Callie, now your books are all standalone, so you can read any in any order. Obviously, doesn't make any difference to anyone. I have read your books in order because I remember I read The Accident back in when it first came out, and I contacted you and said, I'm setting up the book club. I've read your book. Can you come on? Wow, what a journey. But you've also done, in between you're doing quite a bit of young adult as well. And so, but you've got your new book is coming out. Sorry, I've got someone's messaging me in the middle of this chat. Go away. Your new book, Her Last Holiday, is being published in April, 29th of April. What can you tell us about that?
So Her Last Holiday is basically a missing sister psychological thriller. 2 years earlier, Jenna learned something really devastating and found herself on a wellness retreat in Gozo, where she was trying to deal with what she just heard, which remains a secret for most of the book. But the wellness retreat goes terribly wrong. There's a sweat lodge experience and a couple of people die, and Jenna just disappears. And Tom Wade, who's the man in charge of the wellness retreat, he's their guru. He gets sent to prison for the deaths, but nobody ever finds Jenna or what happened to her, and is ruled a suicide. And then 2 years later, Tom comes out of prison, and Jenna's sister, Fran, reads about this on the tube, that he's come out of prison. And then their mum gets in touch saying, you need to go on his next retreat. When he does another retreat, you need to go on it and find out what happened to Jenna. Now, Fran is the kind of person who hates retreats. She doesn't like hugs. She doesn't like people to stand too close to her. She's quite antisocial. She's very socially awkward. So it's kind of her worst nightmare to go on a retreat. This one's in Wales. But her mum's a real bully, and she bullies her into going. And then Fran turns up, and there's lots of suspicious people, and somebody there is determined that she never finds out what happened to Jenna.
Now, let's just talk very quickly about your book that's out now, your last book that is out now, which I adored, The Strangers even. There you go. That one, which has also had loads of fantastic reviews. I loved it. To me, it was just perfect. It was a great, twisty psychological thriller with very quirky characters, a great plot, cleverly interwoven. So tell people who haven't read it why they should read it and what it's about.
Okay, well, Strangers is quite different from other psychological thrillers, and I kind of set out to do it like that when I started to write it. It's basically about 3 lonely people. So we've got Alice, who is a shop manager in a shopping centre. We've got Gareth, who's a security guard in that shopping centre. And then we've got Ursula, who's a courier, but she's also a kleptomaniac, a shoplifter, that goes into Alice's shop and steals things. And it's about how a crime brings these 3 people's lives together. It's no spoiler to say, at the start of the book, very first chapter, they're standing around a dead body, the 3 of them who were strangers. Then we go back in time, and each of these strangers has a mystery that occurs. So there's a stalker, there's a strange locked basement door, there's a letter from a father who's long been declared dead. And all of these mysteries kind of tie together to this event that ends up with them standing around a dead body.
I have to say that one of the things I this was one of my standout books of the year last year. It was last year, and I think one of the things I loved about the book is that you have three main characters, and as a reader, sometimes there's one character that you don't really enjoy, and you kind of want to skim or want to rush through. But with this one, all three were fascinating, and I loved reading each journey for all three characters. And I personally thought it was amazing, and I recommend that to everyone. Thank you. Right, now, Mike, talking of quirky characters, not yourself, obviously.
Whatever are you going to say?
Who are we going to talk about? We're going to have to talk about the lovely, wonderful, socially awkward civilian analyst, Tilly. Now, for those who haven't read any of Mike M.W. Craven's books, why not? Shame on you. You need to start, and you need to start with The Puppet Show. Which is the first book in the series. We're on coming up to book 4 now. Look at me, I'm working as your PA. I should be paid here. So The Puppet Show is about a socially awkward civilian analyst, Tilly Bradshaw, and Washington Poe, who is a disgraced detective. And they basically are a crime-fighting duo. Now, just before I start asking you a question, I just want to read some of the comments that are coming in because it's gone a bit mental. It's gone mad here. Hold on. We have got, Donna wants you to know this is book heaven, her 3 favourite authors and me. Vanessa says Behind Closed Doors was great. Someone's just bought Behind Closed Doors. Shari Miller's just bought it. Tracy Clark loved Behind Closed Doors. Amy O'Brien is watching it with a glass of Prosecco. The dilemma was great wherever the beach was. People are going to now start looking for a license for Wi-Fi. So I'm just reading his here. Amber loved that Behind Closed Doors contained a main character who's Down syndrome and that the focus was not on their Downs. The dilemma was an overnight, can't put it down. And Eileen thinks C.L. Taylor is a genius.
I wonder what the pause was there.
Sorry. I'm trying to catch my breath. There's quite a lot of comments here. Joe Kelly has read books by you all, but Tilly and Poe are the best, which is lovely. Okay, so let's talk about Tilly, because to anyone who hasn't read, she's an incredible character, and I think she's someone we all can not necessarily relate to, but perhaps we all have a Tilly in our lives at some stage or know of a Tilly. She is absolutely fabulous. Can you explain where she came from, who she is, where the inspiration, why you have such a wonderful character in your books?
Yeah, I mean, she sort of wasn't designed that way, if I'm being honest. There's sort of two routes to Tilly, I suppose. The first one was when David my agent asked me to write a new series set in Cumbria again, because that's where he thought he could sell. And I couldn't just rewrite the same series. And in my previous series, I had as the sort of sidekick an ex-para who was a bit of a lunatic, very sweary, unpredictable, violent, incredibly un-PC. But he was quite funny. So when I initially sort of sketched out the puppet show, I thought I'll for Poe's sort of the person that he works with, because my sort of great love is American crime, and they tend to work in pairs, and I think that works quite well rather than the big teams. So I sort of made Tilly the sort of opposite to Matt Towler, but she wasn't as quirky as she is now, and that came about when I didn't actually have a name for my main character Poe until somebody misheard me say Washington Post. It was during the presidential primaries in 2016, and Donald Trump had said something. Wherever, I can't remember what it was, but I laughed anyway. And someone said, "What are you laughing at?" I said, "Oh, this thing in the Washington Post." And she said, "What's the Washington Poe?" And I thought, that's my name. That's such a great name for a character. But you can't call a Cumbrian Washington without explaining why. And when I sort of worked out the backstory to his name, he became a lot darker than I'd intended. And to balance that, I sort of made Tilly a lot lighter and innocent. And I mean, you say quirky. I mean, she sort of is. She's just, for those who don't know, she's got an insanely high, a once in a generation IQ, and she has spent her entire adult life in academia. She's been doing pure mathematics at Oxford. And eventually she rebels and joins the National Crime Agency. And in the first book, The Puppet Show, Poe is, or they think he's come to the attention of a serial killer because somebody's carved his name onto a dead person's chest. And he quite rightly says, who's the best analyst in the unit? And his boss says, well, it's Tilly, but you can't take her out into the field because she's just not capable of operating out in the fields. But Poe wants the best because it's his life, as well as some other parts of his body which he'd rather keep hold of at risk. So that came up, and together they didn't really know how to talk to each other to start with. They certainly didn't like each other, but now the sort of this complete oddball relationship, which is quite fun, and it's great fun writing about it. Really is, because you can go wherever you want, and you can also get really complicated things in because Poe doesn't understand things. So you get Tilly explaining it to Poe, which it's a device to explain things to the reader. So that's quite cool as well.
Now, so we've got 3 books are out now. Apparently, The Puppet Show is not available in the US on Kindle, so you might want to speak to someone about that.
No, we haven't sold it in America yet.
Right.
David, he did something with the Little Brown contract and had it excluded. He wanted to keep the US and Canada rights back, so we're keeping hold of them for now.
Right. Sorry, Shari. Shari was trying to buy it just now. So we've got The Puppet Show's book 1. Black Summer book 2, and these are all you're able to buy and download, and then you've got The Curator. And then I've just been sneaking around and found that Dead Ground is coming out on the 3rd of June.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that one.
It's the sort of central premise of it is Poe is called. He's actually in court because he's about to get evicted. So Tilly's sort of defending in court, and it's going very well. Then the court gets 2 men come in. They stop it to say you need it now. They take him away. They won't identify themselves. They take him down to Manchester, and he ends up working for the security services. But he gets dragged back up to Cumbria, where a man has been killed in a brothel, and he doesn't really understand because Poe works for the serial killer unit, which is a real unit actually. And he doesn't understand why such a sort of bog standard, low level offence has sort of attracted his and Tilly's attention, until they start looking into the victim, and nothing in his background checks out, even though he's got a very high profile job. And they end up linking it to this heist, which happened 3 years earlier in Southampton, where nothing was taken. It was perfectly executed. Nothing was taken. There was a ceramic rat, left at the scene, and that was it. So it all sort of kicks off from there. But it's really Poe going head to head and up against MI5. Basically, he's working for them, but they think they can control him, but obviously they can't. So it's a bit of fun. It's certainly the funniest book I've done. It's my favourite book, which means it'll probably do the worst. But I'm looking forward to seeing what people think of it, to be honest.
Well, I will let you know. Now, Bernadette, your new book. Now, I haven't read it yet. It's on my Kindle. It's called The Therapist, and it's out in April. What can you tell us about it?
Well, The Therapist is about Alice and Leo. I always have to think of the names because when you're on your next books, you forget the names of your characters. So little rehearsal there. Yeah, Alice and Leo. They move into a gated community in London. And it's a big move for them, and they haven't been in the house very long before Alice discovers that something terrible happened in the house about a year previously, and she decides that she wants to try and find out more about this. It really affects her. She becomes a bit obsessed, like a lot of my characters. She's a bit obsessed about this and wants to try and find out what happened, but she finds that none of the neighbours in the circle, which is a group of 12 houses, really want to talk about it, and so she makes it her quest to find out what happened. There's a lot more to it than that, but I can't really say.
No.
It's always hard with psychological thrillers because you have to make it sound more interesting, but then you give too much of the story away.
Now, one of you mentioned before, I think, Callie, one of your books has been optioned, or any of your books. What are you allowed to tell us anything about that?
Yeah, the thing about being optioned, it's always really exciting to announce it. It's kind of rare to get optioned. It's basically when a TV company or a film company buys the rights to your book, and they normally buy it for a certain length of time. Typically, it's about 18 months. And For an author, it's often a cash sum, sometimes not. I did have a film made out of my second rom-com, Home for Christmas, which is on Amazon Prime.
Hold on a second. Carry on. I'm just going to cough it. I'll mute myself. Carry on.
And that I didn't get a penny for that, but typically you do if it's a big company. It was a little company that made that. So I've actually had, now discluding that out of my crime, 3 books optioned. So I had The Lie optioned, which was my second book, which is a lot of people's favourites, and The Escape, and now Sleep. With The Lie and The Escape, the options ran out and they didn't renew them. So I think that cough's catching.
Sorry.
So basically that means nothing's happening with those books. The options have run out. With Sleep, it got optioned for TV by Bill Kenwright, who is behind lots of big musicals, but he's also got like a TV offshoot. And the screenwriter contacted me last year to say he'd written a pilot episode. So that was good. That was very exciting. And then the option ran out, but good news, the option's been renewed. So now the Bill Kenwright's team will be approaching places like Netflix, BBC, ITV, whatever, to see if they can sell them the concept behind Sleep. So I just have to wait and see. But typically there's such a tiny chance, when a book's optioned. That's why I put on Twitter the other day, it's so lovely when you see people like John Mars and Sarah Pinborough. Their books have actually been made and they're going to be on Netflix. The One and Behind Her Eyes, they're actually going to be able to, we're going to be able to watch them. So that is brilliant. So I'm just crossing my fingers for Sleep, but I'm keeping my expectations low.
Mike, anything for you?
Yeah, the puppet show was optioned a year before the book was out, actually. And Collie's right, it's a nice little lump of cash. They renewed it 18 months later because it was an 18-month thing, and they've just renewed it again for 3 months because we've got a script, and it was actually with the BBC for over a year, and the BBC head guy, Piers, who's actually the very top guy, was working on the script. So they've got a very good script now, and the BBC knocked it back in the end. Actually, because of the commissioning landscape had changed because of COVID. And it's now they've extended it now because they've got it in with a few TV companies, including some Scandinavian ones actually, which wasn't something I'd considered. So that's where we are with that. Again, it came out of the blue. It wasn't something I'd ever thought of, particularly a year before the book was out. And it's something I can go weeks without even thinking about because it was never on my sort of wish list. Anyway.
And now I've just reminded you, sorry.
When it's a huge boost for the books. I mean, that would be the most exciting thing, rather than see someone's interpretation of. Because I struggle to listen to the audio books of my work. I'm quite uncomfortable with that. I listened to the first one just because I felt I had to, but I've not listened to any more. I don't even listen to the samples.
That's interesting because I listen to a lot of audiobooks, but I would never listen to like one of your books on audio because I like to make my own voices. I hear voices anyway, but I like to make my own voices. So if I'd listened to one of yours, and I wouldn't be able to read anymore because I would have that voice in my head, and he's not how I imagined it. Bernadette, have any of your books been optioned or anything you think that I mean, I'm not sure what you think. I think The Dilemma would make a really good TV.
Well, I'm not sure whether Behind Closed Doors was optioned the day it came out in the UK by a US film company, and the option has been renewed so many times. So it still hasn't been made, and that was 5 years ago. But I think, they had a director attached to it. That was the last bit of news, which was just before COVID. So I suppose now, everything's been put on hold. So, I've never really counted on any of the films being made or any options or anything, because I was told right at the beginning, it doesn't mean to say your book will ever be made into a film. So it's not something I've ever felt, oh, I can't wait till that film's made. It's just something I forget about until I hear that, oh yes, there's a director attached now. And but I still know it's going to be a long, long process. So yes, so behind closed doors, definitely. And the dilemma, I don't know. I think there was a bit, but they said it wouldn't make, I mean, I don't know. I don't know whether it would make a good film. I don't know how that would go. You talked about Behind Closed Doors being a bit of a Marmite book, but I think the dilemma has turned out to be the Marmite book, because I think lots of people were expecting a psychological thriller, which it isn't really. It's more of a family drama, but I really wanted to write this book. And I think, I do think it would make quite a good film, because I think it does get people talking about what would you do in this situation, which is quite an extreme situation. But other people have to, people do have to make decisions, not quite like that, but very hard decisions in life. And it would be well, if anybody's out there that has a film company and wants to make it into a film, I'll be very happy.
I'll pass their details on to you. Right, we're going to look at some questions now. John Neal wants to know where the best place is to get signed copies in the UK, preferably small indies. I don't know, Goldsboro, I would presume, or Chorley.
Yeah. You always do them at Goldsboro, I think. A lot of authors do them at Goldsboro.
Goldsboro has signed copies of some of mine. I think they have Strangers and Sleep. If you want a personalised copy of the hardback of Her Last Holiday, Max Minerva's marvellous books, which are based in North Bristol. I'm in Bristol too, so I support them. Then I'll sign it to you and do a little doodle and all that stuff. So they're kind of who I support with my signed copies, but only for new books, because it's like a 25 quid taxi journey for me to get there. So just new books that I do.
Lovely, thank you. Mike?
Yeah, mine. Sorry, I'll just all my books are available at Bookends in Cumbria. At the minute they're dropping them off. Lucy dropped them off today, actually, for me to sign and dedicate. Otherwise, I walk past the bookshop on the way to the pub, so pretty much I can sign 30 or 40 at a time when I go in there sometimes. If I happen to sign them on the way back, then you pot luck what you're going to get written in it, to be honest.
I've got another question especially for you, Mike, and I want you to tell me who you think has asked this question. Okay? Why have you got an obsession with melting people's eyes?
That's Imran Mahmood. He's so hard on. He's not very robust, is the politest way I can say it. There was a little bit about an eye popping because of the heat in a burnt body in the first one, and that's all he can talk about. Admittedly, there was a bird getting something horrible happened to its eye, and then in the second book. And I've got a little brown bought a thriller I wrote when I was in probation. Actually, I wrote it during my lunchtimes, and they bought it, and that has something really horrible happening to an eye. I don't have a release date for that yet. They just wanted it so no one else could buy it, I think. 2023.
I have to just remind you of a quote you gave me. I did a blog piece not so long ago on the advice authors have received the worst advice. And some of the worst, I asked you what the worst advice you had been given, and you said write what you know was the worst advice because in your first book you have a serial killer burning bodies, and in the second you describe the killing, cooking and eating of a small songbird, and obviously you say I've never done either, which I'm glad. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean it is a bit of advice that gets bandied about, and I think it's quite limited. I think better advice is write what you enjoy reading. That to me is more sensible.
Yeah.
Advice. If you only wrote what you knew, I mean, it's just very limited, isn't it? I mean, some of the great literature in the world is pure imagination, and it's wonderful. So yeah. I remember saying that too.
Callie, can you just tell us the name of that bookshop again, because someone wants to know the bookshop that you support?
It's Max Minerva's Marvellous Books. If you go to my Twitter, which is @Callie Taylor, it's my bio link.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, another question here. Have you read each other's books? Put you on the spot here. Well, we know Mike's currently reading. Go on, you can flash it again.
He's got the fit. Oh,
Have you read, Kelly, have you read any of Mike's or Bernadette's?
I have read Bernadette's. I read the first one and the second one, and I've got the new one, The Therapist. I've got a shelf of proofs just outside my office in the hallway. It's on there. Mike, I haven't, but only because I'm a bit of a scaredy cat. When it comes to gruesome stuff, I'm a bit like, but that's all me rather than you.
I'll send a copy of Dead Ground to you, because the proofs are ready soon, so I'll get a copy sent out to you, Kelly. And I promise you, there's nothing gory in that at all.
All right, cool.
The first book, The Puppet Show, there is quite an unpleasant scene at the start, but other than that, it's more the investigation. But there's certainly the fourth book. There's not much in it.
I love the sound. I do love the sound of your characters, I've got to say. I love when you were describing the interaction between them and the way they balance themselves out. I thought that sounds really good. So I'll definitely take a look, yeah.
Bernadette, have you read any of theirs?
I've read Kelly's, I read Strangers, and I finished this. Night. So I finished that yesterday, so it's really good. I can definitely recommend Callie's book.
If anyone was wondering what that is actually the proof copy of Callie's new book, Her Last Holiday, which that's the proof copy.
So that's really good. And I am dying to read about Tilly and Poe now that you've explained about them. I really am. So I will be downloading one.
I'll send you a proof as well if you want.
Oh, signed, please. I'd love one. Thank you. Please do.
Hello.
You're going to get one anyway.
Chopped liver here. Thank you. Right. Here we go. Saffron has asked an interesting question because we discussed it before we came on live. You all choose to publish using your initials. Was this to blur who you really are? Are you read more than women than men, do you think, or no? And thanks. So, Callie?
Yeah, I wrote rom-coms as Callie Taylor. So when my agent submitted The Accident, we did it under Cal Taylor, C-A-L, because we thought it was a bit androgynous. But when Avon signed to me, they said, actually, how do you feel about initials? I mean, I think it was because S.J. Watson was so popular, and then there was S.J. Bolton. And I think they just thought, if Callie Taylor is a girly sounding name, which suits rom-coms perfectly, but it doesn't really say psychological thrillers. So, they said, do you want to use your initials? And I was like, yeah, cool. So that was me.
BA?
Well, me, it was for two reasons. First of all, I didn't want anybody to know that I was an author. And so even my friends in France, I didn't even tell them I'd had a book published. So, I mean, I just get in my family either until it was actually published or just before publication. It was just something it was just like my secret garden. I just thought everybody will just think it's rubbish and everybody will say, why have you written a book? So it was for that, because Paris isn't actually my surname. So this is my pen name. And B, I chose my initials because actually I really don't like my name. Which I won't tell my mother, but I've never felt happy with my name. You know, I've never felt I'm a Bernadette, so I've always found it quite awkward, that name. So that's why I just thought I'm going to use my initials. It's much better. Actually, I should have just changed my name, maybe. But.
And MW?
Simple. Well, dead simple, really. I was published under Mike Craven before, and they didn't want to republish it under that. In fact, when I met with my editor at Carmelite House in London, on the lift up, she says, I like the changes that you've made, because she'd asked me to make some changes before the meeting. So just two things: we'll hate the title and we'll hate your name. So she said, have you got a middle name? Well, yeah, William. She said, we'll call you MW Craven then. So I was all right. But at that point, I would have agreed to anything, to be honest. So. Unless they said Imran Mahmood, obviously, because...
No, I mean, honestly, you can't sell books. He's got to give them away anyway.
He's got a TV series coming out, which I'm really looking forward to.
I know.
This book is... Yeah, that's a great book as well. Really good. But,
I don't get sent your books, Imran. Can you correct that, please?
I know. I've got someone on the inside. I'll sort that out for you.
All right, cool.
loved his first book. It was phenomenal.
I did an event with Imran at Bradford Lit in 2018, must have been, and we were heckled. And it's the funny. I'm not going to do the story because it would make me I'd have to do an Asian accent, which obviously would get me cancelled. But Imran tells the story really, really well. This little old Asian lady heckling. She's heckling me to start with. Then she was heckling Imran when he was doing his reading. Really funny story.
I will get him to tell us more about that. But I will say, Callie, you've got his book, or you haven't got his new book?
I've never been sent any of Imran's books. His briefs, no.
It's only 2. You missed his first one. Yeah, so the second one is the one that Bernadette's got.
Yeah.
That's not out till June. But
I'll buy the first one.
The first one has been out for a few years. Why are we sitting here?
The first one.
Why are we sitting here giving him any airtime? For God's sake, honestly. It's not even that nice. But tonight, more importantly, Sarah Pinborough's series started on Netflix. So that's quite exciting. So you obviously do get sent quite a lot of proofs, which as a writer is a privilege, and or a chore if you have to give a quote. Anything of interest that you should tell us about that we should read now, Callie? Anything that you've just read that you love?
The most recent one. So I'll praise this by saying I've been really badly reading blocked since lockdown last year, and I have mostly just been listening to audiobooks, and there are books that are already published because it's quite hard to get proofs of audiobooks unless it's for a debut because of the timing issue. But I think I have broken my reading block. I got my Kindle out, which I haven't used for years, and I read a little bit before bed every night, and I was gripped by That Night by Gillian McAllister, which is, I'm not sure what book it is, 6th book.
It's not out till June.
Yes, it's not out, but it's very good. It's about some siblings who accidentally, or not, don't know, kill someone and then bury the body, and what happens after that. And it did keep me gripped, and I'm very easily bored. So
excellent. All of her books are fabulous. So she was on a few weeks ago talking about that. Bernadette, what you reading?
Well, I just finished Kelly's, and which is really good. I recommend that. I'm going to read Imran's. That's my next book, because I've got loads, and unfortunately I get sent so many proofs and I just can't read them all. It's just really hard because you go to bed every night feeling really guilty because you haven't done any reading that day, but it's impossible to get through them all. But the one book I would really, really recommend, I absolutely loved it. It's going to be one of my favourite books of all time, is We Begin at the End, Chris Whittaker. Absolutely. When I read that book, it was this kind of, oh my God, how does he do it? You know, the writing is just beautiful. I love that book. The characters are great. I mean, Duchess is just such a brilliant character. And yeah, I mean, I'd love to write like that. So yeah, definitely Chris Whittaker, We Begin at the End.
Fabulous. Well, when you're bored tonight, you can click onto my blog and see the Tracy Talks To with Chris.
And yes, I will do. Yes,
about it and where Duchess came from.
Oh, right.
Mike, any book?
Yeah, I mean, I'll certainly echo what Bernadette says about We Begin at the End. It's an astonishing. I mean, all Chris's books are actually, but he's really stepped it up with this one. There's 2 that sort of stood out for me. One by Fiona Cummins, When I Was 10, which I think has been. I don't think it's out yet. Actually, it was supposed to be out last year, but that's a really, really good book about 2 10-year-olds who kill their parents. And there's a quite a quirky book which I was sent called Everything Is Beautiful by Eleanor Ray, and it's about a hoarder and sort of how, and it's called it's Uplit, which is the author Eleanor, because that's a pen name, so I knew her when she was a crime author. Said it probably isn't going to be your cup of tea because everyone just assumes I read what I write, which isn't the case at all. And it was this really, really sweet and enjoyable story about this hoarder who moved into a house and she can't get on with the neighbours because the house attracts rats and it's dangerous for the children because there's so much stuff in the garden. It's just a really, really nice story. And there is actually a crime in it anyway. And you sort of get to work out. You get to know why she became how she was and things like that. But it's a really, really clever book, and that's only just been released, I think, maybe a couple of weeks ago.
So, what was the name of that one?
Everything is Beautiful.
Everything is Beautiful. Lovely. Okay, I'm just going to say there's a whole debate going on here about Marmite, because obviously I mentioned it. I forget that we've got US members and they don't know what Marmite is, so they don't try. So there's an entire dialogue going on in the chat about what Marmite and why it's got. What is it like Vegemite? And I can't. So hang on. Let me just see what else have we got. Donna, final question, I think, and then I'll let you go. Donna wants to know who inspired you all to become authors and what attracted you all to the psychological crime genre. Callie?
I'll keep it brief. So first of all, Enid Blyton made me want to be an author. Then Roald Dahl introduced with Tales of the Unexpected Stories to twisted, dark stuff, which I loved. And then as an adult, I think it was The Collector by John Fowles. He's not known as a crime author, but it's deliciously dark about a guy who takes a student prisoner in his house and the interplay between them. And I just thought,
right, I'm just going to write this one down. Right, because I need another book.
Oh, yeah. It's a classic. Loads of crime authors love it. Sarah Hillary's favourite as well.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. And Mike, we'll go on to you then. There's something I said. Right, Mike. What? Well, I've forgotten the question. It was so long ago. Hold on. Oh no, where is it?
I remembered it. Well, like Polly, I started out with Enid Blyton, the famous five, and
sorry about that.
But I just downloaded about 2 months ago The Magic Faraway Tree, which was great fun reading that again. Then I moved on to Alistair MacLean, and I think if I was going to put it down to one author, actually I'll put it down to Michael Connelly and Terry Pratchett. I think the two authors who have had the most influence on me, and who they're always sort of sitting on my shoulder when I'm writing, sort of nagging me, you can do better than that, you can do better than that. There's certainly a lot of Harry Bosch in Poe, and probably a bit of Sam Vimes as well from the Ankh-Morpork City Watch, the Terry Pratchett character.
Lovely, thank you. Bernadette, who inspired you? And
a bit like Kelly, well, Enid Blyton, that's when I think I knew I wanted to write. But then Agatha Christie, I was very influenced by Agatha Christie. I read all her books and I just loved trying to work out who the murderer was. And most of the time I couldn't. And I just thought it was so clever the way she did it. And although I never set out to write psychological thrillers, I just wanted to write really, I suppose, family dramas. So, but I'm sure just reading those books of Agatha Christie's has helped me, when I'm writing my psychological thrillers.
Lovely. Right, well, I just want to thank you all very much for coming on this cold, dark, horrible lockdown evening. It's a change, isn't it? It's nice to get up and get dressed.
It's actually nice to see people and to have a talk about books. It's lovely.
Yeah, see people that aren't in your house. It's nice just to see it. Anyway. So we shall hope for a fast recovery so we can all meet up at Harrogate, perhaps, maybe not this year, but perhaps next year. So on behalf of me and the book club members, thank you so much. Thank you for writing such amazing books and keeping us all entertained and helping us escape our miserable reality at the moment. And I can't wait personally to read The Therapist and Callie's new book and Poe and Tilly's book number 4. So thank you very much. If you ever do need to send any signed copies, I'll give you my address later. But it's everyone's now saying thank you and goodbye. So I guess I'm going to say so. Just thank you so much, guys, for coming on. Really appreciate it, and we shall all speak soon.
Yeah, thank you, Tracy. It was great.
Okay, bye.